Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to be with you again this morning. It's always a great place to start the year to come here and have a chat to you, as I did certainly last year, but I've been here many times before. So thank you for coming out early. For some of you, I suppose you just don't come back to work, although I know you're a hard-working sector, but what a great start. Hey, so first of all, I just want to acknowledge our friends, Pōwhiri from Ngāti Whātua Auraki. I think your comments, particularly around wealth is a wondrous thing, and also we should be thinking about how we grow assets for our grandchildren, actually is the theme of what we should be talking about. I think that's a wonderful setting, and thank you for that. Also, I just want to acknowledge Rob, your chair, who I've known for many years, and Kirk Hope, of course, the new CEO. It's not quite so new, you've been here for a while, but it's great, and I'm looking forward to having those discussions that you referred to in your speech. Also, I want to acknowledge our friends from the FMA, and particularly Samantha, who's due to speak, I think, straight after me, aren't you? And obviously Samantha and I have a lot to do with each other. And I think it's always great coming here. It's a bit of a scene setter after a great summer, and of course we want to get ready for a big year. So, as you know, well, as some of you might not know, but I've had a particularly good holiday. I've been away, I feel really refreshed. The biggest thing I've done is I've scored a hole-in-one the week before last. So, I don't know how many golfers we've got in the room, but I've been playing golf a long time. So to get a hole-in-one in front of the clubhouse did cost me a bit of money, but it's a small price to pay. But look, on a more serious note, 2024 was a big year, and it was a challenging year. We know all our business people, and you know, as Liam mentioned, I come from a business background. I know how tough it's been for businesses, but also individuals, particularly with high mortgage rates. It has been tough. So what we want to do is actually focus on what we're going to do in 2025 to put ourselves in a better position. And I think the first thing is, you'll probably remember from this time last year, that I announced plans to reform the financial services sector. As you know, at that stage, things weren't in a great shape. And over successive governments, what we've done is we've layered up a whole lot of regulation, which is causing excessive conservatism in the financial services sector, and actually becoming a bit of a blocker for growth. My mission when I took on this portfolio, and I do want to acknowledge Honourable Chris Farfoy, who's in the audience, and also Honourable Simon Power, who've held this role before me. My key focus is that I wanted to simplify the financial services landscape, and this meant clarifying the roles of the various regulators to remove duplication, and secondly, tidying up the laws and regulations that were constraining businesses from providing great financial products and services. My guiding principle was to make it simpler to provide financial services while balancing the need for appropriate guardrails and consumer protections. Over time, this equation has become unbalanced and was so risk-averse that it was harming consumers. Many of you heard me talk about the perverse outcomes for making it too hard for Kiwis to access a safe loan from a reputable provider. I'm pleased to say that these financial services reforms are now well progressed. Democracy is a wonderful thing, but unfortunately it takes a heck of a long time to develop good policy and run it through a thorough consultation process, which means it can take a long time for things to change and make its way through the system. However, I'm pleased to announce that we're on track to pass the Financial Services Bill through all stages by the end of the first quarter of this year. I also want to just reflect on the passage of the Contracts of Insurance Bill. This piece of legislation has been sitting around for too long. It was long overdue. The Law Commission recommended that our insurance law be updated in the 1990s, and it's fantastic that it's finally got over the line, although I can't understand why it did sit around so long, but that is now enacted and is a piece of legislation. In terms of other work, the Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs is responsible for 6 Crown entities, including the Commerce Commission and the FMA. And according to the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, the Minister is also broadly responsible for corporate law and governance, financial markets, competition policy, consumer policy, protecting intellectual property, and trade policy and international regulatory cooperation. Quite significant list of things. And actually, as many of you know, actually underpin a lot of what we're trying to do in the economy. These are absolutely fundamental pieces of architecture for our economy, and in 2024 I kicked off work relating to nearly every single piece on that list. This year in 2025 I intend to tick 2 remaining items off that list by progressing a review of the Copyright and Intellectual Property and also launching a review of the Fair Trading Act. The Fair Trading Act is a hugely consequential piece of legislation that covers everything from product safety and product descriptions through to contract terms and advertising statements. And it's very important that we actually make sure we're getting better outcomes. So that is a major piece of work. But coming into government, unfortunately, the structural economic issues we face, whether they're declining productivity, lack of capital, or dearth of foreign investment, or over-regulation stymieing growth and innovation, means our economic reform is urgent. As a result, you should hopefully have seen or heard me in the media or events like this talking about the work I've underway to modernise our economy. And these include, first of all, reviewing the Companies Act and reforming our corporate governance law. This has not been done or reviewed for 30 years. There have been changes to it, but not a fundamental review. And related to that, the Law Commission is about to start work on reviewing the duties and liabilities of directors. Again, we have got ourselves in a pickle with duties and liabilities, and we need to make sure that people are prepared to take on reasonable proportionate risks. The second thing is we're implementing a consumer data rights and laying the foundations for open banking and open electricity, and to inject more competition into our economy. Third, we're going to create a new model for the economic regulation of water services. There's been 3 pieces of legislation for the water reforms. The third contained the new model that we're going to do to regulate the water entities, overseen by the Commerce Commission. But I've made sure in that there's a great deal of flexibility depending on the sophistication of the water industry or entities themselves, so we can take a proportionate approach to them. Fourthly, we're initiating a more coordinated whole-of-government approach to combating online financial scams, and I'll talk about that shortly. Fifthly, we're invigorating New Zealand capital markets by removing barriers to list on the stock exchange and making it easier to KiwiSaver funds to invest in unlisted assets. 6, we're reviewing our competition law to prevent against excessive market concentration. And again, I'll talk about that. And the 7th thing I've done last year is we're responding to recommendations from the Commerce Commission, and Minister of Finance, Honourable Nicola Willis and myself are implementing all 14 recommendations from the Commerce Commission to address the banking sector and also with focus on the grocery sector. 2025 is about delivering on this work. And as I know it sounds a long and unwieldy list, but you can broadly view it, all the work undertaken through the lens of 2 key themes. The first is creating the conditions for businesses and private enterprise to thrive so that we can grow our economy. As you would have heard the Prime Minister talk about, a bigger, wealthier economy means more jobs and higher salaries for Kiwis, and it means increased tax revenue that ultimately flows through into being able to afford more schools, better roads, and better and more hospitals. This means making sure that our laws and regulations that determine the operating environment for businesses are modern and fit for purpose. The second lens is about competition. The reality is that New Zealand suffers from an overly concentrated market in several key sectors of our economies, whether that be banking, groceries, building supplies, or parking services. The OECD and others have drawn a link between our lack of competition and falling productivity, and the spotlight is well and truly focused upon invigorating competition. From the government's perspective, we will be going through every key initiative and program of work line by line and asking ourselves and our officials, will this grow the economy? Will this improve competition? Will this help New Zealanders to take legitimate risks? Will it enable them to hire more people or staff or access some capital to invest in their business? Will it free up time so they can be used more productively? Will it encourage innovation and enable them to offer new products and services? And if the answer is no, we're not going to progress it. But if the answer is yes, we will progress it. So in terms of that competition, this is one of my top focuses for this year. Competition is one of the most important ways to drive productivity, grow the economy, and lift living standards. That's why I've launched a two-part review. First, I have asked officials to update the merger and competition provisions of the Commerce Act to ensure our legal framework is fit for purpose. Mergers can improve market efficiencies, but can also entrench market power and create monopolies. Our merger regime has not been reviewed in over 20 years. It's another one of those fundamental pieces of architecture that have not been done like the Companies Act. And since that last 20 years, our economic landscape has changed quite significantly. I think everyone in this room can probably point to a merger or acquisition that, with the benefit of hindsight, we should not have allowed. So we have a consultation document out in the market. Consultation submissions close very shortly, but we will be actioning that first part of that initiative pretty quickly. I've also commissioned an independent review of the governance structure and effectiveness of the Commerce Commission to maximise its performance. On the one hand, we need a strong competition law, and on the other hand, we need a powerful and courageous regulator to enforce the law. And I've made it clear to the Commerce Commission and also to the FMA, I want them to be courageous litigators. We need to make sure that people are acting appropriately and within appropriate the domains of the competition regime as we have. These are important structural changes and signify a strategic shift to our economy. In terms of capital markets, this year I'm continuing to reform to unlock the capital for the benefit of the New Zealand economy. I know that New Zealand urgently needs to address our falling productivity and failing infrastructure. That's why I want to invigorate our capital markets to encourage investment in infrastructure and our great New Zealand businesses. As part of this, we're looking at changes to make it easier for KiwiSaver funds to invest in unlisted assets, such as infrastructure projects and these great New Zealand businesses and manufacturers. To do that, I've worked closely with the KiwiSaver industry, and I acknowledge some of them in the room today, to work out some specific reforms that will help them get themselves in a position where they will have the option, if they so choose, to have that ability to invest in those types of assets. We're also exploring adjustments to reduce the costs and barriers faced by companies listed or listing on the stock exchange. And I want to power up the New Zealand Stock Exchange and make sure we're not at a competitive advantage. And the first point is we're at a competitive disadvantage vis-a-vis particularly Australia. We will look at other aspects of capital market settings in the second half of the year. The third area is consumer data rights, or most people think about open banking or open electricity. As many of you are aware, the Consumer and Product Data Bill is currently being progressed and is set to have its second reading in the next term of Parliament, starting next week. So hopefully over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we will have that bill go through the second reading, then it goes into the Committee of the Whole of the House and has its third bill reading. So by hopefully in the next few months, that bill will be passed. The bill will establish a framework to unlock the potential for consumer data, driving innovation and competition in key sectors. We recently consulted on applying the bill to the banking sector to enable open banking, and we're beginning work to applying it to the electricity sector. The ability to provide new Data-driven products and services is hugely rewarding and exciting. The possible applications of open banking include the ability to apply for a 10-minute home loan and make instant low-cost payments. So that's already happening around the world and happens in Australia. Why the dickens is not happening in New Zealand is because we do not have the right framework. It is a major drive for me. It's also part of the banking study that we're going to open up open banking. And I regularly engage with the Commerce Commission with fintechs. We've got 30 fintechs I regularly talk to. We're doing things like doing a regulatory sandbox that Samantha might talk about, but we also want to make sure not only create the regulatory environment, but we're also promoting those fintechs to be able to come and do and open and offer real competition. And we also want to do that in the electricity sector. So that's an exciting development. It's been slow in certain parts of the world, but places like Brazil, it's just gone very well, and we need to make sure that we're on the same sort of speed. The next area is scams. I want to talk about the big issue for financial services is scams, because last year New Zealand reported loss about 200 million, but the figure is much higher than that. It not only is an increase, but the figure could be as high as $1 billion. And the PM, Prime Minister, has appointed me the lead minister for looking at scams and having an all-of-government approach to tackle this dreadful blight. I'm currently working with telcos, banking sector and digital platform providers, and I'm watching the reforms being progressed in Australia. I expect to be in a position to announce progress on this work very shortly. Combating scams is an important social and moral issue. Scammers are causing harm and distress to Kiwis, but also to businesses, and it is a financial issue. As Kiwis become increasingly concerned about scams, they become distrustful and unwilling to do businesses online. One of the byproducts of scams is legitimate businesses are finding it increasingly difficult to get in touch with their clients and customers and actually have a proper engagement with them. For these reasons, it's vital that we work with industry to better protect Kiwis from sophisticated and devious scammers, most of whom are outside of New Zealand. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about ACC. As Liam noted, I've taken on the role of Minister of ACC very recently. I'm incredibly excited about the role of ACC. It's a big beast. It's got 50 million under investment. And while there's a lot to be proud of with ACC, the scheme faces significant challenges. For the last 10 years, ACC's performance, measured as rehabilitating people, injured people and getting them back to work, has continuously declined. It's a 10-year trajectory. And this comes at enormous cost. The liability of existing ACC claims increased from 52 billion last year to 60 billion, sorry, in 2022-23, to 60 billion last year. That's an $8 billion increase in our liabilities. Currently and clearly, that is unsustainable. As employers, you will know that levies are set to rise by about 5% to help meet these rising costs. But we cannot meet the increased costs through levies alone. That's why we've commissioned an independent review of ACC's performance so we can address broader underlying issues with the scheme. Turning around ACC's performance is no mean feat. It is like turning around a super tanker. There's a number of key actions that I will initiate early this year, and I've already got meetings, had meetings, and I've got another one this afternoon. But it will take time for the super tanker to correct itself, and actually for the benefit to show up in the government's accounts. ACC is now a significant item on the government's liability in its balance sheet. My job as minister is to chart a course by creating and putting in place a robust action plan to get us back in shape. I want to be clear that it's not about cost cutting. It's about ensuring ACC is fair and sustainable and can serve future generations without saddling them with unreasonably high levies. And one of the key principles of the ACC scheme is that future generations should not have to pay for today's injuries. If we do not arrest this financial situation now, all we do is kick kick the can down the line and make it much harder for the next generation. So look, in closing, I can tell you 2024 was a busy year, but 2025 is shaping up to be just as critical. We've got several work streams on the go, which I've outlined today. I expect to be progressing them at pace, and I look forward to working with you to take up this economic challenge to the next level. Thank you for the Financial Services Council for having me here. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
It's an impressive suite of changes. I guess, I've noted, and you'll get people from the financial sector, from the right, sort of berating the government for wanting a big bang, a silver bullet to, solve productivity and supercharge the financial markets. Are you confident that if you can execute all these changes that you've outlined, that sort of becomes a silver bullet or a big bang?
No, it won't be a silver bullet, but look, first of all, I just acknowledge you as an industry. You're a significant part of the industry, whether, wealth management through the banking sector. So it's a huge facilitator of growth. So that's why it's really important we get the structural arrangement in place, the architecture in place. I think, that hopefully will get to that situation where we've got people much more comfortable in a better position and can do their job, and you guys can get on with your lives and create wealth for New Zealanders. But I think, that's one thing, and that's sits in my camp. But I think, when you look at it's like a business, when you look at government, there's so many different things. We've got a labour issue we've got to deal with. We've got, obviously, how we get capital coming in, and obviously there's work around foreign capital coming into New Zealand as well as the stuff we're doing domestically. Regulations, some of that covers regulations. But, there's a whole sort of, when you think about it, there's more of that. But there's a whole lot of touch points that to actually drive the economy forward, just as a business, there's never one single bullet. You actually got to put all those sort of metrics into place. That's why there's a big group of ministers working on this, just being absolutely bloody minded, if I can use that term, around how do we put in some real change metrics that actually help drive the economy forward.
That's great. Look, I've got a few questions coming in already, some quite specific, but Contracts of Insurance Act passed approximately when will it get a launch date by order in council?
So the contract bill has already gone through. So the what we are in the process of doing some of the regulations. So we'll be doing that pretty quickly over the next few months. So it's all basically been implemented.
The top question on my slide is probably a bit awkward for you. I could almost answer it myself, but the Minister mentions mergers we look back on and wish we hadn't approved. It says examples. Do you want me to?
Yeah,
you get in trouble if you say it.
Well, you go for it.
It's possibly my good friends at ANZ who I get on with very well. Possibly some people look back and wonder whether National Bank and ANZ should have merged in 2005, and possibly there's a supermarket one that people worry about too. So those are the big obvious ones. They happened, and we're dealing with
it's staggering that we haven't looked at those merger settings for 20 years. So I'll give you a real life example of what we're talking about, the merger settings. A recent trend is private equity, and more being Australian, obviously we've got some significant New Zealand domiciled private equity firms now. But over the years, this is when I was pre-politics, I was a merchant banker, but, I saw these companies coming into New Zealand and hoovering up lots of smaller companies and making consolidating them and then selling them off. And that in itself is not a bad thing. I don't have an issue with that. But the merger settings at the moment don't allow the Commerce Commission to have regard for, you've bought 49 of these companies, you want me to review and approve that 50th acquisition, but I can't have regard for what's gone on before or what I think likely going forward. So that's a specific example where we haven't kept pace for what's actually happening in reality.
Sure. Look, as you might expect from the KiwiSaver sector, a question with a lot of thumbs ups on it around, will you be considering other KiwiSaver settings that could support more retirement savings for individuals, such as increasing default contribution rates? I might even go further and say, would a national government ever consider a compulsory super?
Hey, well, that's not my gig. I've got to be careful to stay in my lane. So that's Minister of Finance, and the tax settings actually sit with Simon Watts as Minister of Revenue. But I've got a role, which is obviously what I'm doing. So the bit I'm in control of, I'm working with the sector to make those changes. But your wider point, what I'd say to you is many Kiwis don't have enough money when they retire, and we have New Zealand Super, but KiwiSaver provisions is a very important component of that, and now 110 billion under investment. So it is important we get the right settings.
And any review around hardship withdrawals, is that ongoing or being considered?
Yeah, look. I used to get lots of these letters, and obviously they now go to another minister. But the issue around, KiwiSaver was set up for people to retire. We got, 60% of New Zealanders own a house, but there's 40% who don't own a house. And when they get to retirement, many of them have to rely on New Zealand Super. And so the more we can help people save, and the compounding effect of interest is just so important. People say, I just want to withdraw. I don't have a problem with necessarily withdrawing for a house, but doing hardship, withdrawing $5,000 doesn't sound like much money. But what they don't understand, when you compound that over 30 years, that's, I forget what the number is, probably 60,000 if I did it in my head. That's what you're actually doing by taking out that small amount of money. So it's very important that we keep that tight. If anything, we should probably look at other options around it, but I'm not trying to flag something else. But, it's really important that people have enough money when they retire.
Sure. Another popular question here, and this is on scams. In Australia, they are they're forcing online platforms to participate in anti-scam measures by law.
Yeah.
Is that something we will do here if required?
So I went to Singapore last year with the Australian Minister, and in fact I had the Australian Minister here for a few days just before Christmas. We are working with Australia and Singapore. So we want to make sure that we're trying to work as much as possible in a collaborative approach. One of the biggest issues with social media platforms is many of them are doing a good job, but my question to them is, what are you actually doing in New Zealand? They're normally acting at a global level, and I want them to act locally. What are you doing to stop scams in New Zealand? Not what you're doing in Asia Pacific or in the US or wherever it is. So we are going to work with other countries to work on that, but I've already asked social media platform providers, the telcos, the banks are well progressed, but I want them to have a code, and if not, I'll impose a code on them. That's a discussion I'll be talking about very shortly. But I want to make sure that there is responsibility. And just a word of warning, don't go on Temu. Well, be very careful you go on Marketplace and Temu, because that's where you're going to get scammed most likely. So if you are, don't use your credit card, don't use your debit card, use another card to act as a... Otherwise, if you want to get your accounts removed and emptied, just go on those places. Be careful.
We probably, I mentioned the global turmoil earlier. There is a question here which perhaps goes to how we view risk in the financial markets. It notes that Trump is taking crypto mainstream.
Yeah.
Does New Zealand do that? How do you feel about the level of financial market risk that is out there in the world at the moment as you try and sort of accelerate and perhaps deregulate a bit in New Zealand?
Yeah, look, cryptocurrency is obviously here to stay, and so that's one thing. President Trump has obviously really pushed it, which is fascinating. I think, and I was on Finance and Expenditure, and we actually commissioned the review of cryptocurrency and blockchain, all that sort of technology. I think we should embrace it. Reserve Bank has finally sort of got there after many years of prodding. Working on some work there, but there's real opportunities in it. Obviously we have some people that trade cryptocurrency, but I think the real opportunity actually is New Zealand being a trading platform. And I think at UAE they are, I think it's UAE. They have different trading platforms. Somewhere this has got to be traded, and I think there's a real commercial opportunity. I'm not saying you have to actually go and promote or promote certain cryptocurrencies, but actually somewhere they've got to be legitimately traded. And having that platform, I'm quite embracing of some of that. And by the way, blockchain is a fantastic technology. If you want to deal with AML, blockchain is the technology. Because if you know anything about blockchain, it's the most secure technology. So, you know, there's parts that we want to be really embracing. Obviously, we want to be careful about other bits. Some of you would have made a lot of money trading cryptocurrency, and that's the height of of risk. But, you know, I think we've got to look at the opportunities, the commercial opportunities. And that's the way government should think, shouldn't it? We should be commercially rather than think about, the rules we've got to put in place.
Look, it's a fascinating discussion. I could
Hey,
go
don't
on.
you think?
We could talk to Andrew for another hour, probably.
We all think about goddamn rules all the time. And everyone, why we can't do something. As Prime Minister said, why can't we say yes? Eh? But I think we just got to work out where in that thing you want to play. Sorry.
No, it's absolutely right and fascinating because, you know, it does seem to be a cultural shift that you guys are really pushing this year in terms of how New Zealand looks at the world, looks at business. But as I say, I could talk to you for another hour probably quite easily. Come on my podcast and we maybe do that.
Maybe we'll do that, Dan.
Yeah. But we are going to in order to get everyone out of here, we're going to have to wrap it up there. So I'd wonder if you could just thank the Minister and we will, we're going.
Thank you.